All right, if you did not know, you better ask somebody, you better ask somebody, you better ask somebody. We are here at EMCON 2018. Oh my God! Woo-hoo. So, if you didn't know who I am the Peace Man, the craziness, the bananas. What they call me?
Supreme Lord of the Rumpus.
What? DP don't have nothing on my chimichangas, baby. So, if you didn't know who I am, that's who I am. And guess what? We are here with the Bitten Apple. I'm saying, check out that YouTube, Google it. Grandma, I'm talking to you, Grandma. My name is the Peace Man, and if you didn't know, I'm talking like a wrestler. That's right, brother. The vitamins, the training, I'm keep going. And guess what? I have issues because coffee is working right now. So anyway, if you didn't know, we are here with the forget this. I like this one better. This is the Gata Negra, and if you don't know what Kawaii Hop is, you better look her up, because her albums are so fabulous. So, Gata, you having a good time right now?
Yes, I'm having a
fabulous time at EMCON 2017. So, if you didn't know, you better ask somebody. You better check it out. This is Big Apple TV. So, and we're out.
Leanna.
Testing.
Renee. Testing. Yes.
Mic check. We're doing mic check.
Got you. Yes. So I also go by my middle name too.
Oh, Renee.
Leanna Renee Hieber. That's me.
Leanne Renee Hieber is in the house.
Yay.
Wait. She's ready to ask you a question already. Wait, I was trying to just do a sound check.
She's ready.
Okay, so you know what? Let me just. You want me? You're gonna have to walk up to the mic. Okay. So, if you have a question to ask this young lady about her work,
Her mini works.
her mini works. I was.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process. Okay. So please come on up and ask her a question. So, like, you ready? What's your name, dear?
Samantha.
Samantha want to ask her a question, and we give it up for Samantha, everybody. Even if you don't know Samantha, you better clap. All right, so you ready?
Well, Samantha, hello. This is our guest. Ask away.
So, what gave your idea to write the book? Where did my ideas come from? Yes. Fantastic. That's a great question. Thank you. And that's a perfect question to start out. Samantha, you're awesome. So, basically, my interest in writing Gothic Victorian fantasy, so I'm writing historical fiction. I love historic time periods, and specifically I'm interested in New York City. We're in New York. I love our state, and I love New York history. So I was drawn to that from a very early age. Even though I did not grow up in New York, I grew up in Ohio. So, but I was always interested in the big city. So I knew I would eventually move to New York. So I just, from a very early age, loved history, but I also loved it even more if you told a ghost story with it. So ghosts and paranormal goings-on factor into all of my work as well, because I think that it's really fun when you mix history with a good ghost story. So both of those things go through all my work. So thank you.
So right there, you have
Thank you.
so many things that make me follow up questions on that.
Oh, great.
So first off, when you first came to New York, was it in your mind what you thought you were going to see?
I knew that historic New York was there. I just had to look for it. You know, the modern skyscrapers and the hustle and bustle of the city. That's not the New York that draws me. The New York that draws me is Greenwich Village, the stuff that's still there from the 1700s, the 1800s, and the 1900s. So New York has such a rich cultural history, and also I was drawn by its diversity too. And New York has always been a diverse place since the 1600s. I mean, once the Dutch came, they did come with violence, and they came and they displaced the Lenape tribe. But a positive angle of New York's history is the fact that you had 14 different languages being spoken in Manhattan in the 1600s, on downtown Manhattan. 14 different languages in the 1600s. So New York has always been this really rich, wonderful, diverse place. So when I came here, I knew that I was going to be basically going into an international city. And I loved everything about that, because I came from rural Ohio in the middle of nowhere, and it was very boring. And there's nothing boring about New York City, and that is what I love. And so finding the history there, I knew I wanted to write about New York City. So my favorite thing to do whenever I've been in a place that I don't know very well is to take a tour. And in this case, I really thought I would not only enjoy taking a tour, but maybe becoming a tour guide. So my earliest work, becoming a tour guide of New York, researching about New York, it all came together as I was working on my first books and writing about the history and learning about it and leading other guests who were similarly engaged and excited about New York just as I was. I had been a tour guide in many other places because I come from a theater background, and so I was a tour guide in Ohio, I was a tour guide in Minnesota, I was a tour guide in Florida. All these various places that I'd been, I knew that like being a tour guide was a really good side job for me because I like telling stories about history. So I do it on the page, I do it as a side job, and it's all really flowed together really nicely.
And you mentioned tour guiding. I did not know this about you because I'm reading it on here. Ghost tour guide. So
specifically, yes.
How does one get into the ghost tour guide business? And have you actually seen a ghost?
Yes, I have actually seen ghosts, plural. And experience them. Not ghostly phenomenon don't always happen in terms of actual ghosts appearing. Sometimes you will hear them. So that's what's known as a clairaudient experience. So there's a clairvoyant where you see something. Then there's clairaudient where you will hear something paranormal. So I've had both clairvoyant and clairaudient experiences. In terms of getting into the business, I'd gotten my tour guide's license. That's in order to be a tour guide in New York City, you have to be a licensed New York City tour guide. So you have to pass a test about history and about all these different aspects of the city. Because, I mean, let's be real, New Yorkers would make up anything for a buck. So it's a vetting process. I mean, let's be real. We know our own, right? And so it's a vetting process so that people actually understand that there really is legitimate history involved. So you take a test, and then I was involved in the big red double-decker tour buses.
Yes.
That was a rough job. I did not enjoy that, but that was my first job as a tour guide. That gave me some experience. And then when I started publishing my novels, I was asked to read a ghost story at this one woman's ghost tour company party. Turns out that ghost tour company, she became my boss like quickly thereafter, because I said, she said, I run a ghost tour business. You write ghost stories. Come read one of your stories at my company party. And I said, great, do you need another tour guide? Because I would much prefer talking about ghosts, because that's what I do for a living, rather than being on the red double-decker buses, because it's just a rough, exhausting job. For people who don't really want to learn about history, they just want to go to Macy's, and they should just walk from Times Square. But anyway, so that was a shift towards a much more appropriate business for me. So that was entirely happenstance. It was a thing of what I was already doing leading into the next thing, which is kind of how that's all come about. Everything I've done has kind of led to the next thing, sometimes in a roundabout way. But.
And I see we have a young lady
Yes.
here with a question.
Hi.
I have 3 questions.
3 questions.
All right.
If we wanted to go on one of your tours, who would we contact?
So the tour company that I work with is called Burrows of the Dead. Burrows of the Dead, and that's burrowsofthedead.com. It's a great company name, and it's a small company run by women, and it is, we are thankful to say, the highest rated TripAdvisor ghost tour company in Manhattan. There are several others, but we are, and not just Manhattan, there's tours of the outer boroughs as well. So not just Manhattan. And it's a great company. So I highly recommend you look for burrowsofthedead.com. And I have loved working there for the past, think we're going on 4 years, something like that. So,
And my next two questions are, what is the next thing you're working on? And for people who are not here and can't see you, you're dressed in this beautiful black, I would say 18th century outfit, early 19th.
19th, yep.
And do you dress like that all the time?
Do I dress like this all the time? This is the best question I get. It's my favorite question I get. And yes, the only time that I'm not dressed like this is if I'm working on a film set and have to blend into the background or something. So when friends try to clarify that, saying, do you mean that a pair of jeans is a costume for you? Yes, in fact, a pair of jeans is a costume for me because this is in fact how I dress. Give or take the fascinator. I'm not always in a hat, but I'm always in some kind of layer of black lace or velvet or vest or some kind of thing that's completely, I am a walking anachronism. And I always tell people, if you like my clothes, you'll like my books. I dress like I write. And it's a great sales pitch because somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I love your outfit, I love your look. I'm like, yes, it's what I do. I am a walking advertisement for what I do. So it's a real fun way for me. Basically, I wanted to dress like this as a kid, and so I was trying to find a career path that would justify this every day. So, justify long black layers and trouncing around as a Victorian Gothic person all my days. So I basically keep staying in this genre because it really is like my foremost interest. It's everything I want to do. It's captivated my interest. The Gothic Victorian look, the style, the feel, it's captured my heart since I was 13. I started my first book when I was 12, and it was set in 1888, and so it's a lifelong passion of the 19th century with spooky stuff. It always has to have spooky stuff. And what I'm working on next is another ghost-filled series. In my young adult series, Magic Most Foul, which begins with Darker Still, this is my young adult series. There's two characters who grow up, get married, have a child, and her name is Eve Whitby. And my next series deals with Eve Whitby growing up and becoming a member of the New York Police Department, but as a medium. So if you guys remember the show Medium, which was about a woman who was a psychic who advised for the police department, I basically pitch my new series as the show Medium meets my favorite book, which is The Alienist. That's by Caleb Carr. It's a dark 19th century mystery set in New York. Gritty, amazing, full of history. It's fiction, but he did a lot of wonderful research. So I pitched these two things, and it's currently on as a Showtime show. So I pitch this new series that I'm doing, The Spectral City. That's the series title, is The Spectral City. And I pitch that as the show Medium meets The Alienist. And I'm hoping that folks will tune in. It's basically, a young woman. She's 19 years old. So it's, again, kind of merging that young adult audience that I have with an adult audience. Everything I write is PG-13 in content because I have 9-year-olds to 90-year-olds that read my stuff. So I want everybody to pick something up and it not be a drastic content rating shift. So with that, Eve is this young woman who has a department of psychics, and they advise and they get tips and they try to follow cold cases, or they try to follow up on things that get presented to them that other people wouldn't want to take on. And of course, as for young women in the 19th century, they have to face a lot of backlash because that's at a time when working women were very rare. Women were working in all kinds of fields, but there was a lot of pushback. So they deal with that within the department and still trying to hold their own while they're being threatened because somebody doesn't want them messing with their business. So it's got nice, fun, paranormal stuff. They talk with ghosts. So the whole point of them being operatives for the NYPD is that ghosts are as much operatives as are the mediums too. So I have ghosts who are working for the NYPD as well. So it's a fun series, and right now it's slated for a trilogy. If it does well, we'll do more. It launches in November, and it's with Kensington Books. Kensington is I'm very proud to be with Kensington Books because they're the last independent New York publisher that is not owned by one of the major conglomerates. So it is the last one that New York has. So it's still a New York house, so it still comes with the prestige of being New York published, but it has its own agenda that's a little less, I mean, everything in publishing is numbers and a bit corporate, but they're still independent, and I think that's really, really wonderful, so I'm blessed to
They
be
don't
with
have
them.
the corporate greed mentality.
Not in the same way, no. They really get behind authors and artists in a way that's really important, so.
So, you just said that the next series of books has to do with the descendants of this series, right?
Correct.
So then, do you have like a timeline for stuff that is actually modern day?
I haven't gotten much past. It's such a good question. I have not gone into a timeline of modern day, mainly because I don't frankly want to write much in the 20th century. I have an upcoming book that is called Miss Violet and the Great War, and it carries my Strange and Beautiful saga forward into the First World War. And that's about as far as I went. That's a miserable war. It's a miserable time period.
What war is a good war?
There's no good war. There's no, well, at least in World War II.
That was the happy fun war?
Well, no, but you're fighting Nazis, and so there's a clear enemy.
Okay, all right.
There's a clear enemy. Like so there's a justifiable reason for World War II. In
All
World War I, it was not really
mess.
clear. It was just
a
an
mess.
absolute mess.
Okay.
At least in World War II, you were fighting Nazis, and that's a good thing to do. Always fight Nazis. So seriously,
Always fight Nazis. That's the rule.
This is a good.
Always
Yeah,
fight Nazis.
if you've got it, one takeaway from what I say, it's always fight Nazis. So like anything, like put that, just attribute that, make that your own quote, please. That's I don't need credit for that. Just live it, okay?
It's gonna be on all your books from now on.
Always fight Nazi. I think it's a great. I mean, even though they didn't exist in this time period, like hateful people did, and my characters fight those kinds of.
They
would
become
become.
Nazis.
Correct. So everything has an antecedent, right? So anyway, no, I don't have much going into the 20th century because I just really love the 19th century. It's my field of expertise. It's my interest, and I'll keep writing in it until I get told I can't write in it anymore. So.
And they always say to write what you know and or love for yourself.
Correct, exactly. And I think that I love the adage, write what you know, that yes, but also write what you want to know. Write what you want to know, because that means you'll go out and you'll research the things you want to know, and then that's gonna track into your work. So for me it is like, write the things that you want to spend obsessive amounts of time with, research textbooks with, because that's what you really need to do. Now I do have a foundation in Victorian literature. When I went to school for theater, so I loved being on stage, so this is kind of a great thing where I get to now talk about my books and my own stories, and still present and still be a performer, but also have more of my own text on the page than I did when I was taking on other people's works and words as a actor. I went to theater school because I really liked that, but writing was a lot more private. So it took me a lot of measures of confidence before I was confident enough to actually go forward with my writing. I was much more confident being on stage with other people's words. It took me a while to get ready for my own words. But with all of that, I definitely feel that the background academically was important. So I minored in the Victorian era. I majored in theater, and I got a minor in the Victorian era as a general study, because I really do think it's important to have a base knowledge, not necessarily academic. You can just be a self-taught, expert, by being widely read. That's also totally valid. And that was important for me as a foundational place for where I would go with it.
So as to flip the script, now that you are having your own works, what do you think of other people performing your work?
I would love it. I love fan art. It's my favorite thing. I get fan art. People paint my characters, or they digitally will draw them, or they'll cosplay as my characters. I go to Dragon Con every year, so the cosplayer crowd will know Dragon Con. It's gotten up to 80,000 people now that descend on Atlanta, Georgia, in the middle of August, and in the beginning of September. It's always Labor Day weekend, and it's insane, but I love it. And I definitely have people. It's a huge cosplay convention, and I love it. And I've been going since 2008, and I definitely get very excited if anyone comes up to me as one of my characters. It's happened several times, and it's like makes my day. So between that, or people painting, or being creative, if something that I have done makes someone else be creative, that's the best compliment I can ever get.
So you don't happen to sing, do you?
I do sing, yeah.
So singer, actress, writer, and you make some of that jewelry.
I make jewelry too.
You make your own jewelry.
Yeah, see, I'm very busy because it keeps me out of trouble that way. if I get, you know, if I'm not really busy, my mind just kind of goes places. And so, like, it's really, yeah, I mean, people, us creative types, we get that. We understand that. So this is how I stay, you know, out of trouble, by being busier than I know how to be. And it keeps me interested. I love working with my hands as an artist. My father was a potter. He sculpted clay pottery pieces, and he's an art teacher. So I grew up in his pottery studio making things with my hands. And so when you spend a long time on a screen, or in your notebooks or in your research books, it's like, that's a very different mindset. So I have to set that aside sometimes, and then I have to say, you know, I really want to work with my hands and make something different. And so I take vintage jewelry pieces that are broken and need a little love and repair, and get them back out in the world in new ways. And that's a very different mindset to match pieces together, like puzzle pieces, and do compositional work with that. That's very different than what I do as a writer. I think anybody who's creative, I always encourage that creative people do as many things as you can do, because one of those things is going to take off. One of those things is going to supplement your income. Being any kind of artist is a hard road in terms of trying to make a living at it. So all of us who are working professionals tend to advise people to really, you know, diversify your talents and be ready to adapt in one situation or another, and all together it will hopefully make a living. So I'm very, very proud and honored and very grateful that I'm able to make a living in the arts, solely in the arts, in New York City. I have 5 freelance jobs to do it, but they're all in the arts, and they're all doing things that I love, and it's all kind of going in a similar direction. So.
Alright, so for you guys who are just joining us, there is a little microphone in front in case you have a Q&A, versus a Q&A session, but I'm doing most of the Q's and she's doing all the A's. So when you first, you said you started when you were 13, when you started with the...
Yeah, I think it was, I started writing my first novel somewhere between the ages of 11 and 13, somewhere in there. I was writing short stories around 11, but my first actual concerted attempt at a novel was between the ages of 12 and 13.
And have you gone back and read that?
Oh yeah, yes, and I some of it.
So
the rest of it I burned in the fireplace in my parents' home, and that's for the best, because I don't want anybody finding that. It was a sequel to The Phantom of the Opera, the original Gaston Leroux book, but actually it was more of a sequel to the musical because I didn't like how it ended. So, I mean, basically it was elaborate fan fiction before there was an internet to put it on, so I am of that age. No one should read that book. I mean, all credit to Gaston Leroux, who wrote an amazing original novel. It doesn't really need improving upon, so it was probably good that ended up in the fireplace, because I know my friends, they would try and publish it, and no.
But what I'm getting to is that you did, obviously, it's something you want to keep to yourself, but you did do it back in such an early age.
Yes.
And so then going further, you can actually use that to what, I guess, not do.
Well,
or what to do.
That's a great question. I think it's really important for a lot of writers will talk about how fan fiction, writing in other worlds, writing in other people's worlds, is helpful for them in getting like the discipline of writing happening. Great. That's a great way to start being a writer. Write fan fiction. Write in the worlds of other people. That's fantastic. But then if you get to the point like I did, where writing in other people's worlds was no longer satisfying, I wanted to write in my own world. I wanted to make all the rules. That's when you know that you're actually beyond just a fan. That's when you know you're an actual writer. When you want that stuff to be originally entirely your own, that's sort of a place I had to get to. But it was a great training wheels, because the thing of starting writing this thing that was essentially fan fiction that was the discipline of writing. I wanted to do it every day. And now I have to do it every day, or every other day, or every few days as a professional writer, now that I'm doing it for companies like Tor and Kensington and some major houses that I've always wanted to work with. I have to have that discipline. I have to be able to relate to that. That discipline is really critical, and thankfully it goes so far back that it's sort of muscle memory for me. Now, because I have 5 freelance jobs, I can't always write every day, and that's okay. Anybody that tells you you have to write every day or you're not a writer, that's not practical. Write whenever you have a chance to write, and make time for it too. You gotta make time for the things that you love. You have to carve out time in a busy schedule. Even when it's something that you love, it still can be really hard to find the time to do it. But, you know, I'm on deadline and I'm on contract, and that paycheck doesn't come unless I turn that in. So that's a really good motivator. So there's that.
And let's talk briefly about world building, because for people who don't know, when you write something, there's so much more that's not in the book or not in the published world building do you do before the first word goes on the page for your book?
I am one of those writers that writes a little bit by the seat of your pants, or in this case, the seat of my bustle. I'm somebody who outlines and fills it in as I go, and so I don't have a whole lot of preconceived notions other than, okay, for this series, there's going to be Ghostbusters, and it's going to be in this location, and there's going to be this really wonderful dynamic between these two people who really shouldn't be getting together, but they're going to get together. And there's these other two people who are really problematic, and that's going to even get worse. So I start with setting and relationships and how people interact, because my favorite thing about my books are when it's a diverse, all of my characters are a diverse cast of characters that come from all different backgrounds, just as I live in New York City, so do my books represent the diversity of this wonderful state and city and country that we're in. And so all these people from different backgrounds, they come together with their own respective gifts, and I bring basically a Scooby Gang together. I love the Scooby Gang narrative. Like, get the friends together who each have a gift. It's an Avengers narrative too, let's be real. You know, I love that stuff. Get everybody together, get your superhero team together, and in my case, my superheroes are psychics and mediums and detectives and artists and teachers. They're my superheroes, and they get together and together they solve a crime or stop a horrible evil from the depths of the netherworld. You know,
Where they tend to come.
You know, exactly. So the world building really develops as I go. I know character, I know setting, but even the character, they unfold as I go. And with all of these books, they're all parallel worlds. Characters from one series appear in the other. So the world building continues as I go because I see them in different contexts and I get to use them in different contexts. So I'm kind of constantly world building as I go. I just have to make sure that any of the conventions I've set, that I'm still maintaining the rules. That's the critical thing, especially when you're writing kind of by this, like as it comes to you sort of thing. You have to really kind of keep track. Okay, my rules are as such for these characters. Some characters cannot see ghosts, some can, others can talk to them, others can't, and I need to make sure that that's always consistent, because then that also applies that everyone has their own respective gift. And I think that's true about humans, about people in general, that everyone has their own gift to bring to the table. So that's kind of a message that I sort of put in there. While there's an action adventure happening, I do want to have the message of love and acceptance of all kinds of people from different backgrounds. That's underpinning all of my work. That's my basic world building is under the idea of mutual human respect.
So we have less than 5 minutes. So we got to do the promotion portion of the Q&A.
Great.
Where can people find your stuff? Websites, all that fancy
All that good
social media
stuff.
Yeah.
So it's myname.com. That's Leanna, Leanna, RENEEHIEBER. You can think of if I'm one of the top Hiebers that come up. There is a German chemist from the 19th century who created a chain reaction, which is kind of cool. So the Hieber chain reaction, it sounds awesome, but that is in fact Walter Hieber, and that's not me. But if you look for Leanna Renee Hieber, if you look up Hieber, just think like Justin Bieber, but without. I'm less troublesome. I've gotten into less trouble.
So much
than him.
hate for Justin Bieber.
I mean, less is dear, misguided heart. But that's how I tell people, and that's how they remember it. So, but with an H rather than a B. So.
Can we just ask one last question?
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
this
go
young
ahead.
man?
Yes.
Man.
All right.
What's your name? Bennett.
Bennett.
What's your question?
I've been writing stories with my friend for like 6.5 years, and sometimes I write the same characters,
Yeah.
and my friends come up I sometimes come up with some new character, new background ideas, so on and so forth. But I tend to have more characters I could handle. How you do writing, trying your best to write even out all the characters when you have more than you could handle?
So how do you deal with all the characters, in the world? Since you're building the world, you created each and every one of
There's
those
so
people.
many
And how
characters.
do you manage that?
That's a great question because I write large casts of characters. So in each of my series, there's a lot of people there. And so I think the best thing to do is thinking of each of them as their own distinct person, and they're there for a reason. If they do, the characters that you include do have to do something with the plot, and if they're not advancing the plot, then save those characters and use them at a different point. It doesn't mean you have to abandon them, just save them for another story. The ones who you know you need are ones that specifically have the knowledge or the help or whatever. It's something that they specifically uniquely have to bring to the table. So I think if you keep asking that question of how does this character solve this problem or whatever, for me, I keep using some of the same characters because they have very specific gifts. And when those come into play, when they're in a situation, when my characters need an exorcist, I got a guy. I got a guy. So, you know, when my characters need somebody to talk to ghosts, I got a lady. You know, so each one of those gifts, being very specific about it and then using it when it comes in. And then don't worry if you can't find room for it here. Save that because there's always more stories to tell. And just try to think, give them an individual characteristic and quirk just like you would. You know each of your friends, each of your family members has a different specific quirk. Think about, ask the question, okay, well, what's these people's quirk? What's their style? What's, you know, and making sure you're differentiating that and making sure they serve the story. And you can have as many as you want as long as you're able to keep track of those. But if it gets too much for you, then just take a few to the side, promise them you'll get them in the next story. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you, because sometimes when I help out my friend and I meet some artists and writers, I sometimes get start them in like a story or two because I see their character, it's like that spark, like they have like a very important role that'd be perfect for it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's wonderful, and you know, we celebrate that. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be that they have to appear in a full novel. They can maybe just appear in a short story, and you can kind of highlight them for that, and then move on to the next thing. The great thing about fiction is that you can write it in any length. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. So website, what's the website to buy your book, to buy and do
Yes, thankfully I am published basically wherever books are sold. A lot of times bookstores won't always have everything on the shelf. So if you go into a bookstore and you don't see my work directly on the shelf, Barnes & Noble is really good about carrying my latest, but they're not able to carry all of my books. I have 12 of them out. So Barnes & Noble can order any of the books into the store for you to buy if you want to buy in the store. Obviously online, anywhere books are sold, you can find my work if you look up Leanna, Renee, Hieber. I have cards, I have a table over just around the corner. I have a table with all of my books as well as some of my jewelry. Thank you for mentioning that too. I'm on Twitter at Leanna Renee, LeAnnaRenee. I'm on Instagram at my full name. On my website you'll see all the my Facebook links, so I'm on all of the various social medias. And I post there periodically, not probably as much as I should, but I have a blog as well. I have writer's resources on my website, so if you go to my website and you go to the contact page, there's a link to a writer's resource there. So I'm interested in sharing what was helpful to me when I first became a writer, so that's free on the site. I also have a lot of free short stories if you want to try out my writing. I have free short stories on my website too, so I have cards there if anybody wants information, and you can check out the books. And oh, fantastic! Yes, and also yes, Pandora's Pets, who I helped create, are around the corner as well. So thank you all for being here. This is such a wonderful day.
We'll be on our YouTube page.
Round of applause.
It came from radio.com, and our table is also in the back, so it's online.
Yes, come by and say hi. Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Yeah,
You're the best.
Renee Hieber. Give her a round of applause. She is awesome. Wait. Give her a round of applause for that outfit. Fabulous, darling. The fabulous. I love your fashion sense. It's bananas. And check out her table, guys.